that was a truly nightmarish case.
Yeah.
Mr. Pringle was actually hunting the police themselves.
Yeah, absolutely horrendous circumstances.
I saw a man running down the hallway waving a samurai sword. I said, words to the effect of, fuck!
In part 2 of my chat with former Deputy State Coroner Hugh Dillon, we talked about some of the cases Hugh oversaw in his 9 years as Deputy State Coroner. We talked more about murders, suicides and missing persons, along with critical incidents, where someone has died as a result of a police operation or in custody. But probably the most important things we talk about is how we can improve the coronial system. We're lucky to have someone as experienced as Hugh Dillon to talk about such an important role. Hugh, welcome back to I Catch Killers.
Thank you, Gary.
It's great sitting down talking to you and saying that it just makes me reflect on all the things that you see and do in the career that you've had and the amount of times I've been in the coroner's court. One of the things about the coroner's court, I did most of my career in Glebe Coroner's Court, or even out at Westmead. I'm glad the courts have finally upgraded.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty spick and span new building.
Yeah.
Yeah, the building's fantastic.
Yep.
Not quite sure the system is, but maybe we'll get
Well,
on to that.
we're going to talk about the system because I'm always in agreement if something could be improved, and especially something as important as the coronial process. We should at the very least talk about it. So we'll definitely cover off on that. But I remember with the Glebe Coroner's Court, because quite often there's people that there's the families of the victims, and there's also people that the families suspect have been involved.
Yeah.
And there was a very small meeting point, and from a police officer's point of view, trying to keep the parties apart was near impossible in that environment.
Yeah, I imagine so. I fortunately didn't have to deal with that myself, but I was aware. I was constantly aware of the potential for clashes, or even for the need for security on occasions. Fortunately, not very many.
Yeah.
But yeah, they could be very tense meeting places.
Yeah.
And it was a very confined environment.
Yeah, it made it difficult. One case I want to talk to you about, and I want to talk in general about critical incidents, but just as a point of reference, was the death of Ryan Pringle
Yes.
as a result of a police shooting. Now, I think that was in 2012. It was up at Tenterfield. I was the senior investigating officer for the critical incident team. I was working in homicide and got called out, I think it was a Sunday night, and flown up to Tenterfield. The circumstances in which that occurred, and you and I have spoken about it because you oversaw the inquest into the matter, it was quite horrific, wasn't it?
Oh, it's extraordinary. That was a truly nightmarish case.
Yeah.
Usually when police are involved in some sort of scenario and someone dies, they've come on a scene where someone's threatening others and so on and so forth. But in this case, Mr. Pringle was actually hunting the police themselves.
Yeah.
Which was... Well, it put me in mind of the film Deliverance.
You say Deliverance, and it was a horrendous situation. As I said, I got called out on a Sunday night, flown up there. What happened in this particular situation? It was at a farm that was called the School of Happiness, which was a type of a hippie gathering, if you would, probably a way of describing it. There for a festival. And they were camping down near a river, so there was a lot of vans and different things and buses down near a river. And Ryan had, I think, been involved in a confrontation with some of the members at this festival.
That's right, yeah.
Police have been called, and it's public record. I'll mention their names: Karen Peasley and Carter Nivet. were called out, and they were actually married. They're a husband and wife team. They've gone out to this location, and there's no communication. So we're looking at Tenterfield, the town. It was about an hour's drive out from there in a very remote location with no communication, not just police radio, telephones. There was black spots all over the place. They get out there, and Ryan's decided to start stalking them. The police, I thought, were very brave in that they went and gathered up all the people at the festival and got them all to travel out. It was like a wagon train, getting everyone to pack up their gear and get in their vans and follow the police car. Just as they're about to move off, and this is in late at night and pitch black there, Ryan's come out of the shadows and calling out the police and threatening to kill them, and it ended up in a chase round a van, and a taser was deployed, and then eventually Ryan was shot before, and he had a loaded crossbow aimed at the police. Absolutely horrendous circumstances. I compiled the brief of evidence and provided it to you as the coroner. What's your takeaway from a situation like that? Because no one wins. A person's lost their life, but the people have been terrified by witnessing what had occurred. What's your takeaway from an incident like that?
Well, I think there are a number of takeaways. The first thing is obviously a life has been lost, and in this particular case, there were tragic elements of it. Ryan lost his life because he threatened the police, and they acted in self-defence. But whether he was mentally sound or not, you'd have to doubt. He'd been dabbling in drugs and so on and so forth, and so that said something sad about his life, I think. His father, I remember being very affected by Ryan's death, but not angry so much as sad. And I felt really sorry for him and of course for the extended Pringle family. The Pringle family has to live with Ryan's death. But unusually, the police here were almost victims themselves. Yeah. And I can't imagine how terrifying that must have been, to be honest, to have someone hunting you with a crossbow in, as you said, pitch darkness, armed only with torches and so forth. And a torch, of course, could show Ryan where you were as much as possibly illuminate him. So an incredibly frightening situation. And then the police were trying to protect a whole gaggle of people who were simply there for a good weekend and so forth. They were ordinary country police, just decent people trying to protect members of the community, and suddenly they're being hunted for their lives.
Well, the way you describe it and referencing the movie Deliverance, it had that feel about it because they were being hunted, and he was calling out, dressed in camouflage gear, making threats against them, asking all the other people to join in and kill the police. It was something that was surreal, and I remember part of my role as a critical incident investigator, I had to interview the police involved, and I thought they were very professional, but it was traumatic listening to them recount what had happened. And at no point they could shine their torch, but then they'd have to turn their torch off, because if they're shining their torch trying to see out of the see in the dark where he was coming from, they potentially made themselves targets.
Exactly.
And they did everything they could to avoid the confrontation and all the warnings and literally running around the van with him chasing them. It was just a horrendous situation. And then add to it, and I think it gave me a lot of respect for what country cops do. Like, there weren't There wasn't any backup for them. The communications, it was an hour or two before other police came by. You've got the other people in the situation. Someone's just been shot and with critical critical injuries, and they're left there dealing with that. I think the Carter told me he wasn't sure if the rest of the community were going to attack him after the shot, and he thought that might be. So, just a horrendous situation.
Very horrendous and very courageous of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the recommendations that came out of the inquest was that they be awarded some sort of gallantry medal or commendation, which I think they received later on.
Yeah, they did. And I've seen a lot of things in policing, and that was one that was right up there with because they didn't have to stay. They could have just driven out, but they were protecting the public in classic what police should be doing, and putting their own situation at risk and doing that. There was, in all the darkness, you do see some humour there, Hugh, and the people that you would expect at a gathering of the Moon Festival or whatever on the School of Happiness farm were an eclectic group of people. There was one, and I can say this, I don't think he'd take any offence, I think he'd be proud of it. There was one particular person that was a witness to this situation that he didn't believe in wearing clothes. Clothes just weren't his scene. And I don't think you realise, as the Deputy State Coroner, how much work we had to go do behind the scenes to get that witness to appear in court with some clothes on.
No, I didn't know that.
We explained that it's probably a situation where you should wear your clothes, but I don't believe in clothes, man. They're not my scene. I think we convinced him to wear a pair of shorts and a singlet. That's as close as we could get him. But he was itching because he just didn't like clothes. And I think there was another witness. I don't think it was that one that when he was being sworn in, and I'm not saying this verbatim, but it was pretty much along the lines of, what could you please tell us your name? I don't have a name. I'm an entity. And then produced a piece of paper from his pocket.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And produced that, and you handle it very well as a coroner.
Well, I knew I was dealing with some interesting characters, yes.
Well, and the Hippie bus, we had to find a place that he could park the Hippie bus so it wouldn't be stolen. There was all sorts of behind-the-scenes work that you just don't understand. On that, and we're laughing about it, it's a tragic situation, but something that, when we talk about the emotion of a matter like that, is Ryan's father acknowledging the police, not blaming the police, and I thought that was a really moving part.
Yeah, he was. He was very gracious and very stoical.
Yeah.
Clearly, he's quite a well-known person because he was a well-known footballer, and it must have been a tremendous blow to him to lose his son, but also some degree of humiliation, I think. And yet he was. I thought he was quite noble, really.
He was. I stayed in contact with him and had a few communications with him, and he was very pragmatic about it. He was suffering from the loss of his son, but he understood the situation that it was probably inevitable that was going to be the end result with how his son's actions were. But it was a strange one. But they're the type of things, and I want to speak to you about critical incidents because people don't fully understand the role of a coroner in a critical incident. Critical incidents, when we refer to that in policing, is where during a police operation someone's lost their life, and that might be a police shooting or a car chase. Critical incidents are set up as a homicide detective. If it's someone's been shot by police, it'll be a homicide inspector heading up the investigation. Then we have to present the matter to the coroner. There are always contentious issues. What's your thoughts on the way critical incidents are handled?
Well, by and large, I thought they were handled pretty well. One of the classic criticisms of it is that New South Wales Police are investigating New South Wales Police. In some other jurisdictions, you have police from other, say, police forces or whatever. I think ideally we'd have another independent police force doing them, but coroners are meant to be the people who provide the independent oversight, and I think it in practice does work pretty well, because coroners are also assisted by people from the Crown Solicitor's Office, and then there's in police cases there's usually a barrister from the independent bar, very often a silk, who is independent. They have an ethos of independence. And some of the counsel assisting I've worked with have been really quite rigorous in demanding from the police prosecutors, police investigators, that they do various things or investigate various questions or make various inquiries. So I think in practice it works pretty well. But that said, there are people who, no matter how well it actually works in practice, are suspicious because it is New South Wales Police carrying out the critical incident investigation. I know in the parliamentary inquiry into New South Wales coroners, I think it was, the Jumbunna Institute, which is an institute at University of
UTS,
Technology. It's an Indigenous research group, made a submission that coroners were captured by police. And there's a concept of regulatory capture, that the people you're regulating, or the regulators are regulating, capture the inspectors or the regulators. So the argument was, unless you had an independent police force doing the investigations on behalf of coroners, that the New South Wales Police Force would basically, potentially, capture the coroners, and so that the police and the coroners would think alike. That's psychologically possible, but where do you get the independent investigators?
I've got thoughts on critical incidents, because a large part of my career was spent tied up on critical incidents, and I could be in the middle of a murder investigation and a critical incident would occur, and that got priority. My frustration was the amount of time I was spending on critical incidents when I'm in the throes of a homicide investigation. But that's just from a resourcing point of view. I think a perception is the most difficult thing to overcome. The families, many a time I've introduced myself to the families as I'm the person overseeing the investigation into the death of your loved one. And the initial response, police investigating police, because there's anger, and we're making the introductions fairly early. There was always anger and a lack of trust. And I've got to say, in defence of the police, or my observations of the critical incidents that I've been involved in, whether I'm leading it or working on it, there is a degree of independence. That's why they bring the homicide in and part of the process for someone on the critical incident, you're not allowed to know the police or not to have a connection with the police involved in the incident, and that would discard you from the investigation. So I think there is a degree of independence, but I think everyone would be better off if we did have someone else to investigate it, and that there's a lot of oversight that goes into place. We have professional standards oversight in the work that homicide are doing as the independent officers. Just a thought. I tried to sell this when I was in the cops, so I'm sure I'm not going to be able to sell it now, but let me try one more time. You need the skills to investigate the death of a human.
That's right.
Homicide detectives have got those skills.
Yeah.
I always thought the way a critical incident could be run is that homicide get called out for the first 48 hours and make sure the crime scene's preserved, witnesses identified, lines of inquiry, all the things. Set the investigation up. Then you could bring in other people, independent, to come in and complete the investigation. So homicide are basically just setting the investigation up in a direction, and then that independent body, because you can't have interstate police coming in because it'd take too long for them to get to the scene. So you've got to have people be able to respond. Homicide are set up to respond 24/7 at short notice. Homicide there, and then perhaps police from interstate or a different investigative body. Because you've seen it, I know you've seen it, we've been speaking to people that have that view. They won't be satisfied that police are investigating police.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's hard on the people the police officers who do a really thorough investigation. I did a fair number of critical incident inquests, and only on a couple of occasions was I a bit doubtful about, or did I have any doubts really, about the quality of the investigation or the initial quality. And by and large, those problems were solved because I would have a conference with my counsel assisting and solicitor, and we'd say, okay, well, Detective so-and-so doesn't seem to be thinking about this or that, or maybe hasn't explored this issue or something, and then we would. And under the Coroners Act, you can actually direct police to do various things. Don't like pulling rank in that way if you get cooperation, but if you need to, you can do that. I prefer to see it as a partnership, but a couple of times, in a couple of cases anyway, counsel assisting said to me, I think we need to get the whip out and give him a bit of a tickle up or something like that.
I don't think it hurts that as a safeguard if something's missed now, whether it's through laziness, incompetence, or just it's
usually busy.
Well, that was that. Yeah, I started off talking about it. My gripe was I've just been at a homicide. If a critical incident, that was priority because higher up the police realise that there's going to be criticism. So we've got to say, well, we've got the people with the appropriate skills investigating when a death has occurred. Mental health factors that come into police shootings, because time and time again, and I saw that. Have you got any thoughts on that? I know on the back of the Courtney Toppich inquest, there was a lot of recommendations about police training for mental health.
Yeah, I've actually participated a couple of times with Lisa Topic, Courtney's mum, in talking to police about all of those scenarios. Incredibly difficult. Ideally, what you'd always have, if someone is psychotic in some way, you'd have a mental health team who possibly would be escorted by police, but the mental health team would be the first responders rather than police. I think, it's very, very difficult, isn't it? When police, who are very often very young, are the first responders to people acting dangerously to themselves or others. And, I know, I've seen this happen. I've seen police training where, people are shown how to back off and various techniques for trying to talk people down or keep them corralled in a safe space. But sometimes you run out of space. And then it can be a question of basically self-defense. And I know, certainly I've done cases where police have shot people, just two, I think, and they were certainly in self-defense. But they're shattering for everybody afterwards.
Well, I haven't seen a police officer that's been in involved in a shooting incident that hasn't been affected.
No,
And it's as much bravado that can come up after a shooting incident, and police know I'm fine. It does have an impact, so there is consequences.
There are consequences, and I think, everybody knows, everybody who's involved in these things knows that was another human being, just like me, and they've got a family, and they see the family at the inquest. Personally, I'd like to see lawyers who represent police officers and the police association try to persuade cops who involve police that turning and facing the family and apologising might be a good thing for their own mental health.
It's interesting you say that, and I'm not going to talk specifics, but I've seen cases like that, and it's almost there is that little bit of adversarial in the inquest and the critical incident, and I see police react like they want to just break down and cry with the family, and it would be beneficial for everyone involved, but there's a sort of a stoic front that, no, we're fine, we're just doing our job. And I've heard police in the witness box saying, like, I ran an operation where someone was shot and killed, and I acknowledged that, and I was being cross-examined about, it was a success, wasn't it? And I've said, no, it couldn't be further from a success. I'm devastated by it. That was my true belief. But I've seen police that I think anyone would be of that view stand there and try to put on the brave front. No, they got what they deserved. My life felt threatened, and it just aggravates the family, traumatises the family, and I'm sure it traumatises the police. So
Well,
and I think because I think it is part of the legal advice. Don't concede anything here, and you did the right thing, but you can show emotion and still do the right thing.
Yeah, and even if you did have to act in self-defence, and in most of these cases, that's exactly what happens. You can say, but I really regret doing this, and I can see how affected you are. Kirsten Edwards, who I'm sure you've come across in inquests, very, very good barrister, who I think has sometimes represented police in inquests, told me about a case in which she had seen a young cop break down in tears and say something to the effect that, to the family, I think about your son every day of my life, and if I could go back and prevent this happening, that's what I'd love to do. And the family, I think, probably wanted to see his pain, not just feel it themselves. And Kirsten told me that having seen him break down like that, they were much more willing to accept what had happened, to forgive him, and to see him as a fellow human being. And if we can see one another as fellow human beings, instead of them and us, always, you're the other, I'm the strong one, I was just doing my duty or whatever. I think we go a long way to making these inquests are very traumatic for everybody, but we would do a great deal to reduce the trauma that they cause to people, families, police, correctional officers, whoever, if we could show that, if witnesses could show that they are hurting too. I think it would be really good if we could get inquests on more quickly, because I think the longer that the time lapse, it does. And people not only come up with their own theories of how this death came about, which can be right, but are very often wrong. That can be very difficult for people's mental health as well. But I think there is I think in grieving, psychologically, there's a sort of a sweet spot. You need some time to get over the initial impact, and then you can think about what actually happened.
Yeah.
And if you can hear from the people who were involved what happened at that moment, in that sweet spot, then I think you are more likely as a family of someone who's died, or as someone who was involved in the incident, the fatal incident, maybe even the person who caused the death, I think you're more likely to come out with some chance of healing in maybe not immediately, but over time.
Well, Hugh, what you're saying there is words of wisdom, and I suppose that comes from seeing the emotions as raw as it is for as long as you did in the environment. It's confronting, but what you talk about, I think we could encapsulate that in the word of just bring some humanity to it.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that the Police Association and the Public Service Association and those sort of people, the unions, would see the benefit of this too, because sometimes I think thinking legalistically is not necessarily the best way to think about these things.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it's approached from the police point of view, and there's so many more layers to it than just from a legalistic point of view. Another thing that sounds counterintuitive when I say this, but mental health, and we talked about how that could be navigated if there was someone there with the expertise when police respond to those type of jobs. But I'm concerned, I'm saying this now as a former police officer, but seeing what's gone on, the lack of training, tactical training. Now, we're trying to reduce police shootings. Tactical training is not just pulling out a gun and shooting someone. It's being comfortable in the environment, knowing how to handle yourself, knowing how to de-escalate confronting situations. Police are entitled to use their firearm if they fear for their life. If we could train people, train police with more training. Now, I'm not sure, I've been out for years now, but the amount of training days, tactical training days we do, I think it's one a year. Like you have a shoot once a year. Now, I was involved in tactical policing where we had to shoot a minimum once a month, and it was just so it became repetitive. You felt comfortable with your weapon. From when I joined the police to now, what the young police are carrying these days with the tasers, the OC spray, the expandable baton, and they've got so many other things, it's complicated in a time of stress how they're going to react. I just think we need to, and I know there's a cost associated with training police, but we need to dedicate more time to training.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me you say that, because almost always in these inquests, the question of tactics comes up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you often find that when you boil it down, some of these deaths are preventable, and they could have been prevented had better tactics been employed. So, there's training days that I've been up to see or participate in with Lisa Topic. Police have shown videos of how to, retreat from a dangerous situation, et cetera, But how well does that actually work in practice? And I quite often think about a particular case. This is out in Western New South Wales. I won't use the man's name because he was an Aboriginal man, but he was shot and killed by police, or a police officer. The police officer was acting in self-defence because the Aboriginal man had attacked him with a club lock. But there'd been an earlier incident and the police were looking for this man, and they suspected he was in a house. And I have sometimes wondered how good a job I did as a coroner, because although I had a very good counsel assisting, one of the questions that I later thought about was the tactical issue. the police entered the house thinking he may be inside. They entered a room and this man was in there. And the officer pulled out his taser and tasered the man. That had, as far as you could see, no effect on him except to make him even angrier.
Yeah.
He had this club-like and he started whacking the officer around the head and shoulders, and the officer managed to get his gun out and went bang, bang. Now, had the police, what I now think is, and had we asked for more expertise on tactics, could the police have tactically secured that house better, discovered whether or not the man was in the house before they actually entered the room he was in? I don't know the answer to that, but I kick myself quite regularly when I think about this for not having at the time raised the question. In the end, we walked away. I'm sorry, terribly sorry. The man's father was there. There was a group of Aboriginal people who were very angry. They saw it as just another day in the colony, I guess, something like that.
Yeah.
They could not accept that this death had come about through any fault of anyone except the police. And I thought, I now think if I'd done a better inquest, it may have made absolutely no difference to the community, the Aboriginal community, but we would have got a better answer, I think.
Yeah.
And we might have been able to, we might have come up with a recommendation that would have made this sort of situation safer in future.
Yeah. Well, there was a police shooting, and going back a very long time ago, where tactically it became more contain and negotiate rather than going in with the tactical teams. The active shooter scenarios now, that's had to be adapted for current times and the threats. But yeah, I don't think you can get enough training in that type of situation, and you are reacting in what could be the most stressful situation that you've encountered, and you need to be able to think clearly, and that only comes through with training. I think it's something.
It may only happen once in your life as a police officer, but if you can't react instinctively in the most appropriate way, can I tell you, this reminds me of a case that amused me actually. It didn't have a terrible ending.
Okay.
And it happened while I was a magistrate. Two police go to the door of a house. They knock on the door. They say, "Please, open the door."
Yeah.
Anyway, they open the door, and a guy comes rushing down the hallway, waving a samurai sword, and the police officer. I was a magistrate, not a coroner at that stage. The guy was charged with dangerous weapon or something like that. Anyway, the police, what amused me was this. Police have a funny way of writing statements. So, and one of the ways they write statements, and they must be taught this in the academy, is you don't say, "I said, blah, blah." You say, "I said," words to the effect of. And this police officer said something like, "I saw a man running down the hallway waving a samurai sword. I said, words to the effect of, 'Fuck.'" we then retreated. I said, words to the effect of, "Police, you're under arrest." He said, "Fuck off." And so on and so on.
I've seen statements like that, but yeah, there's training and some things stick. But yeah, I see the funny side of that. No names, no pack drills, but I went back as a crime manager, and there was a young officer and just needed educating, and she was trying to do things properly. She's given a statement, and I had to go through the briefs of evidence and look at the brief of evidence, and someone brought that to my attention that, "Hey, boss, can you have a look at this evidence? or this brief, I've got some concerns. And basically she's gone, I think it was a domestic situation. It was and I don't say domestic's minor, but it was a rather minor thing. And she's communicating in a level that people would understand. She's going, well, this is a police officer. So I said, what the fuck is going on here? And she said, oh, nothing, you bitch. Don't you call me a bitch. You're the bitch. And like that. And so I got her in to my office and I said, look, this statement. I said, I'm a little bit worried about the wording here. And she said, we were told we've got to say exactly what was said. And 100% I agree. It's got to be a true account of the conversation. And so I decided to approach it a different way. Maybe as a police officer we shouldn't swear so much. Like that's what's said on this occasion, but maybe next time you're speaking to a member of the public, don't throw in so many swear words. So, but yeah, it's all a learning process, isn't it? It is a learning process. And I feel, I look back at the mistakes I made in the cops when I just got in and, I don't know how I got through it half the time.
Oh, well, fortunately, coroners' mistakes don't end up with, anybody getting hurt or killed.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So we've covered off on like critical incidents, and that was a lot of my time in coroners' courts were put through overseeing critical incidents. Other cases that you've been involved in, the death of 14 people at Quakers Hill nursing home fire. That was a horrendous situation. Do you want to tell us what your involvement overseeing that inquest? Because there was a person, I think he's Roger Dean, was convicted of 11 counts of murder.
That's right.
So this situation's happened. The fires were lit. The people at the nursing home were killed. Homicide have investigated it. He's been charged. He's been convicted. What role did you have as a coroner in that situation?
Well, coroners always have a role to look at homicide cases, these are obviously, this is a mass murder. But the reason we could have decided not to do an inquest.
Yep.
This came after the murder proceedings were over. The reason we decided to do it was for a couple of reasons. One was there anything that we could look at about the management of the nursing home in relation to use of drugs or security of drugs? Because Roger Dean was doctor shopping, he was drug affected, and the reason he started the fire was to prevent the management of the nursing home finding out about his stealing of drugs, Schedule 8 drugs. So he wanted to cover up his tracks, and he was reckless. He didn't particularly want to kill people, but he wanted to cover up his own wrongdoing. So he set these two fires, and then he ran away. Turned up later while the fire was being fought. We're also interested in the response of the fire brigade, of the how the people were evacuated from the nursing home, whether there were any lessons to be learned about the particular fire, how it had been responded to, the building codes, the actual fire hydrants and those sort of things. Because there had been some difficulties with various aspects of connecting the fire appliances to the water supply and so on and so forth. So I've forgotten how many recommendations we came up out of that, but it was a significant number. And one of the main things that in the end we didn't have to recommend because it came out of the case was a change of the building code to require that sprinklers be installed in all nursing homes. Yeah. Because sprinklers can reduce the ambient temperature in a very hot fire enough to save lives.
Yeah.
These sort of fires can get up to incredible temperatures, 600 degrees 1,000
Yeah.
degrees centigrade because they're burning lots and lots of petrochemical materials. Sprinklers can bring it down to a couple of hundred degrees, at which point people can be rescued.
Okay, so that's what it's not just saving the building.
No,
It's,
no,
yeah,
it's not just.
okay.
It's saving the people is
Yeah.
the main thing. The building could be ruined, but the people could be saved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do those recommendations get followed up? Were they followed up in that one?
They were. Most of them were. New South Wales Fire and Rescue are really good at following up recommendations, and in fact, they make a really good contribution to framing recommendations for coroners.
Well, it's important, and like the magnitude of an offence where it's taken 14 lives. It was horrendous, that situation. Some of the strange deaths you've seen, and we're not making light of death. Every death carries a weight and the impact. But what are some of the things that you just wouldn't anticipate that's left a lasting impression on you?
Well, one was, and this was very early on in my time as a coroner. An elderly man was walking his dog outside Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, and somehow he got tangled up with the dog, I think, and the lead, and he tripped over and he broke his femur, and he ended up in hospital. Unfortunately, he died of pneumonia, and because he'd had an accident, his death was reportable to the coroners. Well, I became hypervigilant after that when I was walking my dog, and if anyone came near me with the dog, I was very, very cautious of them. I became less hypervigilant and more fatalistic, I guess, after about a year or so. But
and people stopped reporting this strange man telling them to be careful when they're walking their dogs.
Yes, I think I became less strange over time.
Yeah. I can imagine like things like that you just never anticipated, and it sort of sticks with you for whatever reason.
Yeah, there are others, but I think I prefer not to describe them.
Okay, fair enough. You explained in part one why you left as a coroner, and it wasn't by choice. It was just your time to leave as a coroner.
Yeah.
Since you've left the coroner's court, clearly you haven't. It's like me. I've left homicide and I'm hosting a podcast called I Catch Killers. You've left the coroner's court and you're doing a PhD on the coronial matters.
That's right. So even when I was working at the coroner's court, I really felt that the system could be designed and structured and resourced a lot better than it was. We used to be quite proud of ourselves, proud of the individual work that we did and so on and so forth. But most of us didn't have the opportunity to think much about how the system worked as a system. And as I was saying right at the beginning of the podcast, Gary, it's a multidisciplinary system. It's not just coroners. It's not just coroners telling police to do that or forensic pathologists to do this. It's a group of people all trying to investigate deaths in the hope of either finding lessons or at least giving people answers.
Right.
And I don't think we do it especially well in New South Wales. The system we have it's really more or less the same, except on a larger scale than it was in the early 1900s when the magistrates took it over. It's still run by the magistrates. We have better systems in Australia. There are better systems overseas.
I've heard you say that you rate Victoria as one of the best.
Yeah.
What is it about Victoria that sets it aside?
Well, a few things.
Yeah.
First of all, it was built around a concept, or two concepts really. The two concepts being, one, care for families. So everything that coroners do and the coronial system does in Victoria has to take into account the effect on families and their distress. Secondly, it was all about, well, the second pillar is prevention of future deaths. And in 2008, the Victorian system was reformed from top to bottom. For many years, they'd had the idea of trying to make it more effective at preventing future deaths and injuries. But the system itself was pretty ordinary.
Yeah.
And in fact, they had a parliamentary inquiry in 2006, which flowed from complaints being made by families about how slow it was, how inefficient it was, etc., etc. We have exactly the same sort of system as the Victorians had pre-2008.
Right.
It's not efficient. The people who work in it are really good people, but they're not resourced well. The system isn't structured or designed to be effective or as effective as it could or should be. It's not very good at preventing future deaths.
Yep.
We only hold 100 inquests a year, and the only way coroners in New South Wales have any legal right to make recommendations to prevent future deaths is if you hold an inquest.
Right.
Well, if you don't hold an inquest, there are no lessons disseminated to the community. There's a lot of data collected, and that's sent to a national database in Victoria called the National Coronial Information System. But that's mainly used by university researchers, not so much by coroners, whereas it was set up to help make coroners work really effectively. The Victorians have an in-house research group. Ontario has an in-house research group. I think Nova Scotia. No.
Okay, this is from all your overseas
Yep.
studies.
But and New Zealand's looking at it. So New South Wales has had 2 parliamentary inquiries in the last 4 years, which have recommended radical reform. And basically the reforms being recommended are we set up a specialist court, well-resourced, with in-house researchers whose job would be to try to come up, first of all, identify patterns and trends of fatalities, and which could then be fed to public health and safety authorities to try to save lives. And I explained before, not only is there an incalculable human cost to sudden and unnatural and unexplained deaths, but there is also an economic cost. If we could make the coronial system in New South Wales even slightly more effective, we could save some lives, and we could say, and the money saved, the economic savings would pay for a new system. The New South Wales system costs around about $11 million or $12 million a year. The Victorian system costs around about $27 million a year. I mean, that's peanuts compared with what we spend on health, police, public safety generally. You could have a much, much better system for not very much more money.
It does seem like peanuts on the scale of things.
It is peanuts.
Because a constant complaint I've had dealing with victims' families is the length of time before the matter becomes, and they're almost in a state of suspense, waiting for this matter. And if I'm staying in contact, the inquest that's set down for next year, it was going to be this year, but it's been put off for this reason or that reason. That needs resourcing. Like, we need to be able to get the turnover done quicker.
Precisely. I absolutely agree. I did some research recently for an article I wrote. I looked at all the published coronial findings for 2023 and 2024. When I did my PhD, about 40% of inquests took more than 3 years.
Yeah.
It's now up. It's over 55% now. So, and
Break those figures down. 55%.
55% of inquests
Yeah.
take more than 3 years
To get finalised.
Right.
Right.
And more than 40% take more than 5 years.
Yeah.
Imagine having to wait that long. I have a barrister's practicing certificate now, and I'm representing a man whose mother died in Orange Hospital in 2021.
Right.
And we still haven't got a date for an inquest. We're nowhere near.
And
getting a
is that
date for an
because of the
inquest.
availability of a coroner and availability of the court?
It's for all sorts of reasons. The investigation's taking a long time, all sorts of reasons. But there is a tremendous need, not just for more resources, but for a better way of coordinating these various arms of the system. Michael Barnes, the former state coroner, at the parliamentary inquiry in 2021 gave evidence, and he said words to the effect of, this system is so uncoordinated that it really is a bit of a joke to call it a system at all.
That's pretty damning. And this is Michael Barnes, who came down from Queensland?
Michael Barnes, who came down from Queensland, who's now the New South Wales Crimes Commissioner. Michael really knows all about coroners and coronial systems. He's seen most of them around Australia. He's provided advice to many of Australian and I think New Zealand coronial systems and other places. So Michael's one of Australia's leading experts. He knows when he sees the system not working well.
Well, we have got to get it better, haven't we? I know the trauma it causes families with delays and not getting.
I believe the Attorney General has his heart in the right place, and the problem, of course, as it always is resources, and that means government money, and that means priority. There is always enough money. The question is, where does this idea, this concept of a really good coronial system sit in the order of priorities? And it doesn't sit, in my opinion, high enough. It's time it was improved and radically overhauled.
There's 6 things, and this is in the article that you're the author of, so I suspect you'll agree with the things. 6 things that need to be done to build a modern coronial system for New South Wales. If I could just read them through, and then we can discuss if you want to. 1, define the philosophy and purpose of the coronial system in terms of respect and care for families and prevention of death. I think we've already spoken about that. That was what the whole philosophy, what's it there for? Yeah,
to show recognition and respect, I believe.
Okay. Point number 2, rewrite the Coroners Act.
Yeah, the Coroners Act is out of date.
Yeah.
It's just Victoria, New Zealand, other places have much better acts. And it's so obvious a thing to do.
Okay, so, and that's just making it more contemporary.
Yeah.
The things that need to be changed.
Make it work better.
Okay. Number 3, create a specialist coroner's court to conduct all coronial inquiries and coordinate the multidisciplinary system.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, cases that occur in the country are reported to Lidcombe, where the specialist coroners work. Someone has a look at the case, and then it's sent, in most cases, it's sent back to the country magistrates. The country magistrates are not specialist coroners. They don't have the resources, they don't have the training, and they don't have the experience. And yet they're asked, on top of their very busy criminal and civil loads, to look after 45% of the state's coronial workload. It's ridiculous. Victoria got rid of it years ago. New Zealand got rid of it even earlier. Every single Australian state and territory now confines coronial matters, the coronial jurisdiction, to people who are specialists in that jurisdiction.
Well, I've got to say, Hugh, seeing here, listening to your talk and seeing how you went about your business and the coroners that I've appeared before, the experienced coroners, you've got so much, I call it wisdom, but understanding of what's needed in the coroner's court from the experience that you've got. So it makes a lot of sense. Point number 4, focus the system on prevention of death by developing in-house research capacity and connecting with other public health research institutions.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about with Victoria. Victoria transformed coronial practice, really, and everyone around the world involved in the niche world of coroners knows this. Victoria led the way. It's got some of the leading thinkers about coronial practice. Ian Freckleton is probably the leading thinker in the world. He's a Victorian barrister. David Ranson is a Victorian forensic pathologist, and they are two of the leading thinkers in the world on this. And both of them have the concept of coroners as public health and safety officials, and that means trying to prevent future deaths. Looking at what the data are telling you, instead of taking samples of one case or cases one at a time and thinking, oh yeah, I've got the answer for that, why don't we look at cases and group them together and look at what patterns and trends are telling us and then say, well, what lessons do we learn from this? How do we stop this pattern or trend recurring? And that's why I'm saying that the excuse of governments always is we can't afford it. But if you invested in research like that, or linked up as partners with university researchers to do this kind of research, the savings would be honestly incalculable.
You're countering any arguments about, well, we need the funding. You're saying, well, look at the model we're talking about. It would be fiscally responsible to do that.
And I've been talking to the New South Wales Health about this, and they can see the issue. And I believe the Department of Communities and Justice does too. It may be that in the next couple of years, someone will say, yes, it won't cost very much and this is the bang for the buck we'll get out of it. It would be a big bang for not very many bucks.
Okay. Point number 5, expand the resources and streamline the processes of the system to reduce delay. I think we've
touched on that.
Discussed that. And I see the trauma it causes families, so I think that's something that needs to be done. The delays just impact.
Could I just say about that? But here's an obvious thing. Victoria, almost the same number of deaths reported every year, has 14 specialist coroners. New South Wales at the moment has 7, but I'm told that 2 of those coroners are going back to the local court to work as general magistrates in September. I hope that doesn't happen. But even so, we've only got 7.
The disparity between
Queensland has 10, and they have 2/3 of the workload of New South Wales. New Zealand, with half the workload of New South Wales, has 26. So New South Wales government is doing coronial work on the cheap. It's not saving the number of lives it could do if it invested in the system. It's putting off the evil day.
Well, that's the important thing too, isn't it? It's about saving lives. It's prevention.
Saving lives. And it's all about caring the families.
Yep.
You know, even if we held more inquests and had more coroners, but you didn't hold them for 5 years or 3 years, you might ask, what's the point of holding an inquest in 4 years' time if the impact by then will have dissipated?
Yeah.
You need to hold inquests within the first couple of years after someone's died if you're going to learn the lesson and have real impact, I think.
I think you're 100% right. Point number 6, minimise unnecessary extra trauma for family members by making inquest processes more restorative and less adversarial.
Yeah, I don't think all inquests can be non-adversarial, but in Ontario back in the 90s, they had this idea of a round table kind of a conference. And I don't know if you're familiar with restorative justice.
Yeah.
Anyway, restorative justice means that people who have done something, who've caused a harm, meet the people who have been harmed. And I think we could have a very different kind of coronial system if that became the one of the tools, one of the methodologies where we brought people from hospitals and families together, or from prisons and families together, or police and families together, or whatever it may be. Accidents. People have caused accidents and families together. Because as we've explored in this conversation, very often it's not due to malice. Most often it's not due to malice. Homicides are a very small proportion of all these deaths. It's mostly accidental or something of that nature, or a mistake. If people are willing to meet and open their hearts to one another, that I think could have, might not always, but it could have, in many cases, a very restorative healing effect. It's not closure, but it could enable people to go on with their lives in a happier, less troubled way.
Well, I'm a big advocate for restorative justice from what I've learnt and seen with people that come in here and lessons that can be learnt from it. I think it's something that could be introduced into the coronial sphere.
Yeah, well, if I have state coroner, that'd be one of the first things I'd do, really.
Yeah.
I really would.
And there's one more point. I think we're talking off a camera that if there's how many cases are reported to the coroner in New South Wales on average a year? 6.
Just a bit under 8,000 now.
And
when I wrote that, it was about 6.5.
6.5 from 2 or 3 years ago. So about 8,000 now. And we were talking about the figures, that equates to 80,000 because there'd be 10 people that's been impacted on by someone's death. So
and it might be 20.
Might be 20, so 160,000 people. Look, it's something that what we've talked about, the whole coronial process, it's very close to my heart because I've seen the pain. I've seen what's gone on and the work that happens. Ask you a question, coming to the end of the podcast. Do you fear death in what you've seen? Like examining, I think as a homicide detective, I have a certain view on death from what you've seen. Yeah. What's your take on death? Because you've seen it in more ways than most people would in their lifetime.
Yeah, well, there are some ways I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Particularly don't want to be drowned or burned. But I'm not afraid of death as such.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is early on in my time as a coroner, it took me a while to go down to the morgue and actually see how the forensic pathologists and their teams examined the bodies of those who died. And it took away the fear of death itself from me. People are very much at peace. They're not, whatever happened to them, they're no longer in pain.
Yeah.
And to me, and the other thing about working or getting to know the people in the morgue was I got to know the social workers who deal with the families, and I honestly think they're saints. They were such good people, and such wise and kind people that I thought, I don't know if there's a life after death or not, but at least in this place, those who are dead are at peace, and those who are trying to help their families are really good people. So it's not such a bad way to go to end up in the morgue. But yeah, I'm not afraid of my own death. I really feel, though, that we need to save lives. People, we talked about what a good death is. I would hope our society could ensure as many people as possible have a good death, meaning a death, a peaceful death, a death their families can accept reasonably peacefully. And I say that about our common humanity. I mean, on Sunday there was a march about Palestine. There were too many people dying there.
Yeah.
Jews and Palestinians, Israelis and Palestinians. I think about those people all the time.
Yeah. It's hard not to think about when you see stuff like we're seeing going on overseas. It's horrible.
Mm.
I heard I was at a university graduation and someone doing the talk there. It was palliative care doctor, and he just spoke, and he'd had a lot of experience in palliative care. And a question was asked of him, "What's the most frequent question that people ask you? What's a good death?" And he said, "To live a good life."
Yeah.
And I thought that was a nice way of looking at it. Like it's how do you define a good death? Well, maybe live a good life.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I 3 years ago I had a sort of near-death experience, and while I was waiting for the ambulance, thinking, oh, maybe this is it, that's exactly what I didn't feel I've lived a good life. I felt I'd lived a lucky life.
Yeah.
And I had been very lucky. I've had, 2 beautiful kids, lovely partner. I've been lucky enough to do some work that's been really interesting, meet really good people, work with them. And so I thought, if this is the end, I've been lucky.
Were you thinking about whether you should have put in recommendation that ambulances should respond quicker?
I was watching the clock.
At the time, damn it! I should have made that recommendation stronger.
I was actually thinking about, gee, Triple O, how's this going?
Well, I'm glad we haven't lost you, Hugh, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed having a chat with you, but I just want to thank you for the work that you've done. And at the start of the introduction, I talk about it's the areas that you're interested in or passionate about is something that I share, and I think whether it's a homicide detective or a coroner, we see the pain that families go through where they lose loved ones, and to have someone like you with genuine empathy, care, and the smarts to get the strong message across, congratulations and thank you for your efforts.
Oh, thank you, Gary. It's been really interesting and a real pleasure for me to have a chat with you. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time.
It's been very good to see you again.
Yep. Oh, well. Good stuff. All the best for the future, and keep pushing the reform.
I certainly will. I'm going home to send a letter to somebody today.
No, it's good and important work that you're doing, and a lot of people would thank you for it.
Thank you.